Let me describe a moment that's happened to millions of people. You walk into a room. Maybe it's a hotel ballroom. Maybe it's a convention center. Maybe it's a rented event space with bad lighting and folding chairs. It couldn't even be in the comfort of your own house on a webinar. You're there because someone told you this was going to change your life. Real estate, financial freedom, time, legacy, whatever the word was, they got you through the door. And through the first 2-3 hours, you're actually pretty skeptical. You're taking notes, sure, but you're also watching, evaluating, asking yourself, is this real or is this a pitch? And then something shifts in the room. The energy changes, the presenter's voice gets quieter or louder. A clock appears on the screen, as staff starts moving towards the back tables, and suddenly, you feel something that wasn't there 30 minutes ago. Pressure. Not from anyone saying anything threatening, just pressure. This invisible weight telling you that time is running out, and you need to decide. And here's the question I want to ask you to sit with for the next 12 minutes or so. Where did that feeling come from? Because it didn't arrive on its own. If you've spent any time in the real estate education space, seminars, boot camps, multi-day events, free workshops, you know urgency is everywhere. Tonight only, its price disappears at midnight. We only have 12 spots left. Don't let fear make this decision for you. And most people experience that urgency and think, okay, this is just a sales tactic. I'll just ignore it. But here's the problem. Knowing a tactic exists and being immune to it are two completely different things. Because urgency doesn't work by fooling you into thinking something fake is real. It works by changing how your brain processes real information. That's a much more interesting problem. And today I'm going to walk you through exactly how it happens. 5 specific reasons why seminar urgency is so effective. So that next time you're in a room, or watching a webinar, or sitting in front of a pitch, you can actually hear what's happening to you in real time. The first reason urgency works so well is that it doesn't create pressure from nothing. It finds pressure that's already there, and it gives a deadline. Think about who walks into these events. These are not random people. They opted in, they drove there, they sat down and gave up a Saturday perhaps. That means they're already carrying something. Maybe it's the feeling of being behind, watching people around them build wealth while they stay stuck. Maybe it's embarrassment. I'm 43 years old and I don't own a rental property. Maybe it's fear. What if I spend the next 10 years the same way I spent the last 10? Maybe it's grief, honestly. The quiet grief of a life that didn't go the direction that you planned. That emotional weight walks in the door with every person in that room, long before the pitch starts. And the seminar environment is designed, not accidentally, to service that pain and amplify it. The stories, the testimonials, the before pictures, the presenter talking about where they used to be before they figured this out. All of it is doing one thing. It's making you feel the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And once that gap is alive and raw and sitting right in your chest, urgency gives it a clock. Suddenly, you're not just feeling stuck. You're one decision away from relief, and that's an extraordinarily powerful place to be selling to someone. Because when relief gets attached to a deadline, the brain stops asking, is this a good idea, and starts asking, how do I get there before time runs out? That's the shift. And once that happens, your rational evaluation doesn't disappear. It just gets demoted. The second reason urgency works so well, and this one's critical, is that it makes a good question harder to ask. Think about the questions a careful person would ask if they had a week to evaluate a $10, $25, $50,000 real estate education program. What exactly is included? What does the curriculum look like in detail? What kind of support do I get after the event? Who specifically gets the best results from this? What are the realistic failure modes? Well, refund policy and what does it actually take to use it? There are hidden upsells after I buy in, perhaps. What do independent reviewers say? How does this compare to other programs at this price point? Those are smart questions. Those are questions that protect someone from a bad investment. But urgency makes those questions much harder to ask, not because someone stops you, but because the emotional atmosphere of the room changes so completely that asking careful questions starts to feel out of place. Here's what that atmosphere looks like in practice. The back of the room is active. Staff members are moving with purpose. Deals are going up. People are making decisions. Bonuses are expiring. Not tomorrow. Not in an hour. Right now. The icing is today only. The presenter is talking about who's serious and who came just to learn but not to act. And the person who had a list of protective questions 3 minutes ago starts feeling something they didn't expect. They start feeling slow. Like they're the only one still thinking, well, everyone else has already figured it out. And that feeling, because the last one standing in a room, that's a rewarding moment. It's incredibly uncomfortable. So skepticism doesn't get answered. The crowds get crowded out. The questions don't get addressed. They just get buried under the noise and the momentum and the subtle social pressure of being in a room where hesitation looks like weakness. That's not accidental. That's engineered. The third reason urgency works so well is probably the most psychologically sophisticated. It's a high-pressure similar environment. Saying no, or saying I want to think about it, is rarely framed as a reasonable choice. It gets framed as a personal failure. It's what that sounds like from the stage. The reason most people never build wealth is that they keep waiting for the perfect moment. Fear is what's kept you from moving before. Don't let it keep you here. If you leave today without making a decision, you're making the same decision you've always made. Every successful person in this room decided to bet on themselves. The question is, will you? Yes, very carefully constructed language. Because now the decision is no longer about the product, it's about your identity. You're no longer being asked, do you want this program at this price? You're being asked, are you the kind of person who keeps floating yourself back? And that's a brutal place from which to make a $10,000, $25,000, $50,000 decision. Because once the frame shifts from value to identity, the price stops competing with other investments and it starts competing with your self-image. Nobody wants to be the person who played it safe and stayed stuck. Nobody wants to sit in that chair and think, this is me. This is the moment I chose not to choose. So they buy. Not because they fully evaluated the offer, but because not buying feels like conforming a story about themselves that they desperately want to disprove. That urgency, at its most powerful, it doesn't sell a product. It sells the cost of not being a person who takes it. Now, the fourth reason is something that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. When a significant number of people in a room start moving, raising hands, going to the back tables, pulling out cards, your brain does something automatic. It reads the room for safety. That's not a weakness. That's how human beings have been wired for thousands of years. When uncertainty is high and information is limited, we look to what other people are doing as a signal. If everyone is running, maybe there's a reason to run. If everyone seems confident, maybe confidence is the correct response. In a seminar environment, that instinct is exploited very deliberately. You hear stories from people who almost didn't buy and are now grateful they did. You meet staff moving efficiently, not nervously. You hear the music, it builds momentum. You watch the other attendees nodding, leading in, signaling, buying in with their body language. And without realizing it, you stop forming your own certainty and start borrowing from the rooms. That room feels sure, so you feel sure. But here's the important thing. Borrowed certainty has a very short shelf life. It feels real in the moment because the environment is generating it. But the moment you leave, 3 hours later, that night, the next morning, the environment is gone. And now you're sitting at your kitchen table or lying in bed, looking at the credit card charge, and the certainty that felt so solid in the room, it's evaporating. Because it was never used to begin with. This is why so many people describe that specific experience. I felt so sure when I signed up, and then I woke up the next day and had no idea what I'd done. That's not buyer's remorse in the ordinary sense. That's borrowed certainty wearing off. And the real evaluation, the one that should have happened before the sale, is finally happening now. Usually, after the money is already gone. The fifth reason, and this is the one that catches the most tearful people, is that urgency feels like clarity. In a world full of complexity and confusion, that feeling is irresistible. Real estate is genuinely complicated. Markets are different in every city. Strategies that work in one environment fail in another. Execution matters enormously. Skill takes time to build. Deal flow requires relationships. Capital matters. Timing matters. Judgment. Real judgment takes years to develop. Most people walking into these events know they don't have all that figured out yet. They came because they're confused and they want a map. Urgency provides the sensation of a map. Your side now feels like clarity because it ends the confusion. It collapses a complicated evaluation to a single instruction. Move. But here's the difference that matters. Real clarity sounds like I understand exactly what I'm buying, who it's designed for, how the implementation works, and why it's appropriate for where I am right now. Urgency sounds like you can figure out the details later. You'll miss this moment. Those are not the same thing. One is understanding, the other is relief from discomfort of not understanding. And a lot of people confuse the emotional relief of forced momentum for actual informed confidence. That's why the regret comes later. Not because they were lied to in one sentence, because an entire environment, the stories, the pressure, the borrowed certainty, the identity framing, made speed feel smarter than understanding. So, where does this lead you practically? Urgency is not always fake. Real deadlines exist, and real opportunities do expire. Real offers do change, but the question you should never be asking in those moments is this urgency real? The question that actually protects you is, what is the urgency doing to my judgment right now? Because the moment you ask that, you start hearing the room differently. You can notice when the deadline is designed to prevent comparison, not to communicate scarcity. You can notice when hesitation is being reframed as a character flaw instead of a reasonable pause. You notice when the room's movement is being used to manufacture your certainty instead of earning it. Right. You can notice when the decision has oddly shifted from evaluating a product to defending your identity. And the moment you can see those things, urgency loses most of its power over you. Here's a simple tool you can use going forward. Anytime you're in a high-pressure selling environment and you feel that hold it aside now, ask yourself this. If I had 72 hours and someone I trusted was asking me to explain this purchase, what questions would I be asking right now that I'm not asking? That non-question creates just enough space to separate pressure from wisdom. Because the seminar business is very good at making a fast decision feel like a brave decision. Sometimes it genuinely is, but sometimes it's just a fast decision, and you deserve to know the difference before thousands of dollars are attached to it. If you want to understand how, not just urgency, but the full architecture of how these events are built, how the offer gets framed, how belief gets manufactured, how the room gets engineered to move money, that's exactly what the balls is for. Because most people don't need more motivation to act. They need better filters so that when they do act, they're actually making a decision, and not just responding to an environment designed to make them feel like they are. The link is in the description. And if this video helps you to understand one layer of how this works, the next video you should watch is on the screen right now. Why success stories fool you. Because once you understand how belief gets built in a room, The urgency starts making a lot more sense. We'll see you there.